I'll start with the end of the week because I stayed in New Glarus with Cleo, and it happened to be 9/11. So I did some work stuff that I had to get done, and then we went to a memorial service in the park, and very touching because they had everybody process in, and they set up the flags for fire, police, different services, EMT, and all of that. They had all of the local servicemen and women and people who work in the fire department, the police department, and EMTs, and all that line the whole tent area. It's an outside tent in the park. And they started by, doing some speeches and things, and they will give applause. They had people clap and clap and clap, and it was quite touching because I'm doing this project in community, and these guys are so integral to the community, these guys and gals. They are the person you call in the middle of the night because your husband had a heart attack, and the first responders. And it's part of the community that I hadn't thought about before I went on this journey. And I have stayed with policemen, and I have stayed with volunteer firemen, and I've been in households where people have sons and daughters in Iraq or Afghanistan, and it's a part of community of giving and service that I don't know why I hadn't thought of that before I left, but it's just a big part of our community. So I found that very touching. And then there was a fun band that played a lot of old style country. They're a whole family from Branson. Okay, Branson, Missouri. That sounds good. So anyway, that was the end of my week. But we'll go back to the beginning of the week. I stayed in Dubuque with Lisa and Brian and their 4 children, and I was connected with them through the people I'd stayed with in Cedar Rapids, and that was a fun time. Just we made pizza, and the kids were playing with the camera after they were doing all this sort of stuff, and then waiting for the delay. And anyway, that was a lot of fun. And then I went to Hazel Green, which was not originally my plan, but I was looking at my route and I'm like, oh look, I'm going to walk 19.5 miles and then 20.1 and then 20. And I thought, I don't have to do this because there's other towns on the way. So I went to Hazel Green, and while I was in Hazel Green, speaking of policemen, Mr. Heim from Cascade called and said, are you in Hazel Green? And I said, yes. And he said, I was the police officer there for like 15 years. He's like, you're staying at the Wisconsin House, aren't you? I said, yes, I am. And he said, yeah, I checked in for a minute and I saw you looking right at the Wisconsin House sign. And he's like, does Pat still own it? And I said, yeah, she does. And so it was just one of those funny moments, and I told Pat about it. And she said, oh, really? Wow. Yeah, I remember him. He was here for years and years. So, and then I went to Shullsburg the next day, and actually I have a story about being in Hazel Green. I said, where should I eat? She said, well, there's this bar and that bar. She's like, I recommend this one. So I went to the one she recommended, and 4 farmers came in and had their coffee. And the young guy who was sitting next to me before they showed up said, we have coffee hour here. This is also a coffee shop. You didn't know that, did you? I said, no, I didn't. And then slowly but surely they all showed up for their coffee, for their 5 o'clock coffee. And I just thought that was kind of sweet. And they asked me all these questions. And, at one point they said, well, the one guy bought my dinner. And they were giving me ideas of people to talk to in the next town, which was Shullsburg. And at one point they said, well, okay, you have to just settle a dispute for us. I said, oh, okay. And they said, okay, we're all trying to figure out how old you are. And I said, well, I want to hear your guesses first. And the guy from across the bar said, that can get you in trouble. But they guessed probably a little low. If you're going to guess a woman's age, you're going to guess low. One said 26, one said 29, and one said 32. Or did he say 34? But anyway, 32. No, 32. He said, I think young 30s, like maybe 32. And I said, guys, I'm 40. And they all went, really? And the guy who had guessed 29, he said, I was sure you were under 30. That was the argument. So that made me feel good. And then went to Shullsburg and had some very delicious cheese. Nothing worked out for all the phone calls that different people made for me. Sometimes that, that happens. I just don't have anything that works out. So I went to City Hall because they're nice and early. So I walked into City Hall and I said, I'm doing a project. I have a camera on my head and there's close to me. No, I didn't. I told them what I was doing, and then it's about community and connections. And so I can think of 2 people right off the top of my head. So she gave me a couple phone numbers, and she called, which was an eatery also, and had wonderful food, and the owners were lovely. And again, people came into the bar to have all these questions and offered to buy my meal, which I'd already eaten. So I was like, no, and no, you need to eat. You need to sustain yourself. So it was another situation of just people being really friendly and interested in what I'm doing and nice. I don't know, I can never get enough of that. And I ended up staying with the mayor and his wife that night. And he had a council meeting, and so he said, well, I'm done at 8. And I go, well, I don't mind hanging out here if they don't. And the owner said, no problem, just stay as long as you need to. And their daughter had just recently hiked Machu Picchu, and then their nephew had bicycled across the country and stayed with different people. And she said, I just feel like I'm returning the favor for people being nice to him. And, it's sometimes people think what I'm doing is unfathomable. Like, who would ever walk across the country, ever? And then sometimes people relate to it because they heard about another hiker, or they had somebody stay at their house before, or they knew somebody that did what I'm doing or something related. So it's sometimes a relief just to have somebody be like, yeah, I understand why you would do this. This is something my daughter would do. That's what she kept saying. You guys have a lot in common. So, and then the next night I stayed in Darlington, and my host from the day before, Debbie, actually walked about 4 miles with me, and she made some phone calls when she got back, but I was almost there by then. So when I got there, Patty said, oh, I didn't have time to call very many people, and everybody seems to be out of town. And she said, well, just sit here, and I'm going to make some more phone calls. And they run their insurance agency in town, and they were going to be out of town, otherwise they would have hosted me. Well, that was one of those instances where I ended up at the police station. Not in a bad way, but they have a voucher program there. So they gave me a voucher for a hotel, and the Super 8 was really nice. Like, it had a swimming pool, it had a breakfast buffet, and they put mints on my pillow. I was kind of surprised. It was very nice. It was a brand new building, but it also was just, their service was nice, and they were very friendly. Anyway, I got to this river, and a car pulls up, and Tom gets out. And he's like, Mary Beth and Patty were very, very worried because you're going the wrong way if you're trying to go to Blanchard. I said, oh, really? He said, you were about a mile off course. You meant to turn on Main when you got up to there, and you didn't turn, and they were all worried because they were watching me on the internet. So the interactive part of my project is definitely working. So he gave me a ride over to where I should have been had I kept going straight. And I walked the rest of the way. And again, nothing worked out for me, but my mom called. She ended up calling, I think, the Sunday Lutheran Church and connected me with Levon. And Levon connected me with Cleo. And Levon said she was very jealous that Cleo had me for 2 nights because she had me on Sunday as well, and we went to the memorial stuff. So she did dinner on Sunday. Ice cream. Family this week. Also, the countryside I'm in now reminds me of home. Walnut trees that are in their big green fruits, and I remember crushing those up as a kid and getting my hands all black with a really strong dye to them. My friend and I thought we were squaws, but instead filthy. And then I don't know, Concord grapes hanging on all the trees and fence lines, and apple trees. I had my first very fresh picked apple of the trip. I wanted to pick one off the trees, but there weren't any that were hanging over into the road, so I couldn't. They were all behind big fences. But my host had picked apples that morning when I got to, what was it, New Glarus. And New Glarus is a Swiss town. Not only did we go to the center of the town and go to all the memorial stuff, but then she took me a tour and we went to the brewery. I didn't even try the beer. We just went to the brewery and saw all the cool equipment, got the tour. Beer does not sound good to me at all because of all the walking I do. Usually any kind of alcohol is like, oh. Usually I would try something. But anyway. And it just feels like I'm really close to home. I mean, I only have 300 miles left to go. And just the landscape looks like Michigan to me. Lots of farm country, apple trees, even some wild asparagus growing up along the roadside. My long journey home, I'm almost home.